There are few things that impacts our lives more than food. It's a daily ritual that we take part in for a variety of reasons. Probably the most important is that it is the primary way that our bodies get the nutrients that they need. But there's also a social aspect to it as well, because for many people, it's the highlight of their day to sit down and eat a meal with friends and family. And yet, food can also negatively impact our health. For example, consuming too much food usually results in weight gain and the associated issues that come with that. Then there are many people that have allergies to certain types of foods. And if they eat those foods, they can become very sick, or even worse, it can be fatal. So it's extremely important for people to know the nutritional information about the foods that they eat. And the internet obviously changed the way that we get information. And so regardless of what type of application you're building, be it web, mobile, or even a conventional desktop application, the nutritional-based APIs from APILayer and Edamam can empower your applications to provide users with the accurate nutritional information that they need. Well, let's briefly talk about these companies. First, we have APILayer, and they build web APIs. It's what they do, and they are very good at it. And not only do they build APIs, but they built the infrastructure that their APIs and other people's APIs run on. It is extremely fast, it is highly scalable, and it is highly available. All of those things are important for web-based APIs, and they've got them. And then we have Edamam, the leading provider of nutrition data and analytics. Now, APILayer currently offers 4 food-based APIs through their marketplace, but I want to talk about just 3 of them: the Nutritional Analysis API, the Food and Grocery Database API, and the Recipe API. The Nutritional Analysis API uses natural language processing, which basically means you can submit the full text of any recipe or ingredient list, and the API will return all of the nutritional information about the ingredients. In fact, you can see it right here. Edamam will extract the full nutrition and ingredient data from the text. So if you want the nutritional information about a recipe, you can just submit the entire recipe, and the Nutritional Analysis API will parse it out and return the nutrition information about each ingredient. And then there's the Food and Grocery API. It's a food database that catalogs close to 900,000 basic foods, restaurant items, and consumer packaged foods. The foods in this API can be filtered by diet and other health filters generated by Edamam. So with this API, you can get nutrition information for the basic foods you'd find in the grocery store, such as flour, eggs, milk, and so on. And you can also look up by UPC, fast food, and other restaurants to retrieve the nutrition information on their label. And finally, there's the Recipe Search API. Now, this gives you access to over 2.3 million recipes. That's a lot of recipes. And of course, they are adding more recipes and sites continuously. And one of the great things about this API is they also give you the nutritional information about each recipe. So you don't have to submit it to the Nutritional Analysis API. Now, before we go to the demonstration, let's briefly talk about pricing, because pricing is always important. Now, each one of these APIs has 2 plans. There's the Individual and the Enterprise Pro. The Individual is $19 a month, and Enterprise Pro is $99 a month. And of course, the primary difference between those 2 plans are the amount of requests that you can make. The individual plan is, of course, going to give you a smaller limit, whereas the Enterprise Pro will give you a lot more. Now, there is one other plan. It's the developer plan. If you click on the sign up button, it's going to take you to Edamam's website. The developer plan is primarily for testing. Now, before we get into the demonstration, you will need an API key. So you first of all need to create an account. And as I mentioned, creating an account is free. You don't have to provide any credit card information. And after you sign in, you're going to see accounts in the top right-hand corner. So click on accounts, and you will want to go to the dashboard, because this is where you will create your applications. Now, you will have to create an application for each API that you want to use. So it's one account that you create, but you create multiple applications. As you can see, I already have two applications here. One is for the nutrition analysis API, which is what we are going to use in this demonstration, but I also created an application for the recipe search. If you wanted to create another one, just click on the create a new application, choose which API that you want to use, and then you're going to get all of the information that you need in order to use that API. Like, for example, there are two things. The first is going to be the application ID. The second is going to be the application key. So for each one of the requests that you make, you have to provide that information. And so now that we have that, we can get started building our demonstration project. So first of all, if you don't have Node.js installed on your computer, now is a very good time to do that because, well, you just need to do that. This is how we manage our application dependencies. And so it just makes sense to go ahead and install it. For our purposes, the version number really doesn't matter. What matters is the LTS. That stands for long-term support. So just download the LTS version, install it, take the defaults, and you will be good to go, at least as far as getting the project up and running. So I have already created a directory that I'm going to put this demonstration project in. I just call it Edamam. You can call it whatever you want. And we are going to run a command called npm, that stands for Node Package Manager. This is why we installed Node.js. And we want to initialize this project. And by using -y, it's going to use all of the default values for the project. Otherwise, we would have to supply values for each one of these things. And I don't want to do that. So then we want to install an HTTP server because we are going to be making HTTP requests from within the browser. And in order for that to work, the web page has to be loaded or it has to be served by HTTP. So we need an HTTP server, and we can get one very easily by installing Light Server. Once again, we're going to use npm to do this. The command is npm install Light Server. And we're going to save this as a development dependency. It is a dependency that our application depends upon, but it is only for development purposes. That's what that save dev is for. And whenever this is done installing, then we'll fire up our code editor. And there's one change that we need to make because we can run the Light Server if we wanted to get our HTTP server, but we can make our lives a little bit easier by creating a script to do that. So let's fire up our code editor. I use Visual Studio Code when it comes to, well, just about anything nowadays. And we want to open up this package.json file. There's this scripts object here that we want to add another property. We'll call it simply serve. And then the command is going to be simply Light Server. So that's inside of the command line. All we have to do to run this is say npm run serve. That's going to fire up the HTTP server. It's also going to open up the browser, and it's going to load that website for us. Now, there's nothing there yet, so we need to add a file to our project. I'm going to call this index.html. And I have some markup that I'm just going to paste in because you don't want to see me have to type out all of this. And really, it's very simple. I'm using Bootstrap so that it doesn't look just absolutely hideous inside of the browser. And it's just a simple form to where we have the title of a recipe, and then we can provide the recipe items, and then we are going to get back the nutritional information that we will then display here in the browser. And the output is going to be right here where we have this div with an ID of output. So we will dynamically build that HTML to display that. So inside of our script element, let's have an immediately invoked function. And let's start off by creating some variables that are going to make our lives a little bit easier. Like, for example, I want easy access to this title input element. So I'm going to create a variable called title input, and we will retrieve that element with get element by ID. The ID is simply title. And we will do the same thing for the recipe input, except it's not really an input. It is a text area, but I'm going to call it input anyway. The ID is recipe. Let's also do the same thing for the output. So let's just call this output. The ID is output. And let's also have some constants for the app ID as well as the API key. Let's grab that information from our dashboard. So In my case, the application ID is that. We will set that for that variable. Then we will get the application key there. So we have all of the information that we need. Now we just need to handle the submit event for our form. So let's call get element by ID so that we can get to that form object. The ID is recipe check form. We want to add an event listener for this submit event. And the first thing we want to do is prevent that form from actually being submitted. So we will call the prevent default method on the event object that we get. And then we just need to get the information from the form and then make our request. So the code that I want to write will have a function called fetch recipe, and then we will work with the data that comes back. The data is going to be in a JSON format. So what I want is this data that we have right here to already be an object so that then we can build the HTML to display in the browser. So we need to define that function. And let's get the values from our inputs. So we will have our title, which is from our title input. Then we will have the recipe. We're going to call this INGR, short for ingredients. You'll see why, but this is going to come from our text area, which is the recipe input. Now, the API is going to expect the ingredients as an array, where each element in the array is a single ingredient. So each one of the ingredients is going to be on a separate line in the text area. So we want to take the value of our text area and we want to split it based upon a new line. That way we end up with an array that we can then supply the API. And with that information, all we need to do then is make our request. I'm going to use the fetch API to do that. The endpoint for the API is simply api.edamam.com/API. And in this case, we want to hit the nutrition details. And then we supply the app ID. Now this is app_ID. And we already have that with the app ID variable. And then we have another query parameter called app_key, which is our API key. And then we just need to supply some options for the fetch API to do its thing. Like, for example, we need to specify that this is a post request. So if you want to make a request for the full recipe, you need a post request. If you want just individual ingredients within a recipe, you would use a get request. Let's set the cache to no cache. And we also need to supply the headers because we want to specify our content type because it is going to be in JSON format. And then we just need to specify the body. So we are going to stringify an object that has a title property as well as the ingredient property. And then whenever we get a response back, we're going to go ahead and convert that into a JavaScript object. So let's first of all do a sanity check. Let's make sure that this is going to work. So let's just write out to the console the data from our request. So let's hop on back to the browser. And for our title, this will be just a test title. And the recipe, let's have 1 cup of sugar and 4 sticks of butter, because why not? Let's pull up the developer tools so that hopefully everything is going to be okay. And we get the results in the console. And we get a CORS error. Why do we? Oh, HTTPS, not HTTP. Now, one of the things about Light Server, whenever you save a file, it's going to automatically reload the web page. So we have to put back this information. So let's have our 1 cup of sugar and then our 5 sticks of butter. And then we will make our request. Hopefully now we will get a response, and we do. We see that we have an object. Well, that's a lot of butter. So of course there's going to be a lot of calories. And for our purposes, what we want is this total daily. As you can see, this is an object that has a lot of properties, but each one of these properties is for the calcium, the carbs, the cholesterol, basically all of the daily values that we would need here. And we are definitely exceeding a lot of these. Okay, so now that we are successfully making our request and getting a response, now we just need to do something meaningful with that response. So let's start by just outputting the calories. So I'm going to call this variable simply HTML, and we're going to use a data list here. So that's going to be with the DL element, and each item in this list is going to have a DT, which in this case is going to be the calories. And then we will have a DD element, which is going to be the actual values of the calories. So with that in place, all we need to do now is use the inner HTML on our output, set that to the HTML that we have, and we should see the calories. I don't want to keep entering this every time, but that's just the nature of the beast. So we have 1 cup of sugar and then 4 sticks of butter. Let's copy that. I'll probably copy something else and then I'll have to retype that out. But if we click on submit recipe, we can see that we get our calories. That's a lot of calories. Now, let me quickly add some style here. I want to add some margin to the top. We'll just use margin top 3. All right, so we are outputting the calories. Now we want to build our list for all of the daily requirements. So let's do this. We are going to create an array that are going to be the individual fragments so that we can use object keys to get all of the keys in the total daily object. And we want to iterate over each one of those keys. So we will use for each to where we can get access to the key. And then let's make our lives easier by creating a little temporary object where we will get the total daily key property. And then we will add to our fragments to where we will have a DT element that is going to have the label. So that would be like carbs, vitamin C, vitamin D, all that kind of stuff. And then we want the DD, which is going to be the value. And really, we want 2 things. Well, we don't have that in the console anymore, do we? The first thing that we want is the actual value for this nutritional item, which is the quantity property. But they also give you the unit, which is in the unit property. So for example, if you wanted to get the percentage of your daily vitamin C from this recipe, then the unit will be a %, the quantity will be, well, the percentage value. So this is going to build our fragments so that after our calories, we can simply inject our fragments, but that's an array. So we need to join that with an empty string. That will be fine. And then we will have our full list. So let's go back to the browser and yay, I didn't copy anything. This is going to be the test title recipe once again. And let's add something else. This is absolutely ridiculous, but we're going to add 5 pounds of flour because why not? We will submit the recipe and we will see the results. That's a lot of calories. So fat, that's almost 600% of the daily allowance. Wow. Saturated fat, carbs, fiber, but you can see, and of course this is completely unnecessary. So let's do something a little bit more realistic, like a real recipe for mac and cheese. And let's see what the results are going to be. Okay, that's a lot better. That's still a lot, but this is also for a group of people as opposed to an individual serving. So if you are building food and nutrition-based applications and you need an accurate source of nutritional information, then you need Edamam's APIs. No matter which API or subscription plan you choose, your users can benefit from its natural language processing and its accurate health, diet, and allergy information. It is so easy to use and easy to get started. So head on over to APIlayer's API Marketplace. Pick which API that you want to use and create an account today.